What's going on? Welcome back to another episode of Battle in the Trenches, Week 11 edition in the NFL. We got your quarterback and tight end stardom sit-ems here. Doing a new little series. We're going to break out the quarterback, tight end, running back, and wide receiver in separate videos just so you can come for what you want. As always, we have timestamps in the description. Check out me and Ryan, my co-host, Twitter, at Steve_CTP and at Bootleg Fantasy, and check out our website, climbthepocket.com. And as always, don't forget to subscribe if you're new. If you are a subscriber already, we appreciate you coming back. We hope we're helping you get some W's in your fantasy football league. Guys, it is the Fantasy Football Playoff Push Week 11. I cannot believe we are here, but we're here to help you win. Ryan, what's going on, man? Ready to talk quarterback and tight end?
Oh, I'm always ready to talk about the two positions that people aren't very excited to start every single week. So hopefully we can make things easier for whoever's watching this video.
All right, let's go ahead and get into the video and start them off with the stardom quarterbacks. And I'm starting it off with Big Ben going against Jacksonville. Big Ben is quietly, I guess, put together a couple really good games in a row. Last week got all the receivers going. Claypool had a couple touchdowns. Deontay had a touchdown. Juju had a touchdown. We had 4 touchdowns for Ben Roethlisberger. Ryan told you to start him. I'm telling you to start him this week. Keep this guy going against Jacksonville, who played a surprisingly decent game against Green Bay, but I do not think that's going to phase the Pittsburgh Steelers, undefeated team. Big Ben's coming in hot, getting all these wide receivers involved. Really like him this week against Jacksonville. I'm also starting Joe Burrow at Washington. Obviously played Pittsburgh last week. We didn't really expect a good game out of him. It was an okay game. It was just serviceable. Not really this year in fantasy football. You kind of want 20 points out of your quarterback or it's kind of a bust. So was not a good play last week. But this week going against Washington, I think this is going to be a pretty good game. I think Washington's going to have a surprising amount of offense in this game. Alex Smith threw for 390 yards last week. So if he can bring that same yardage this week, little secret shootout coming here. Terry McLaurin's in on that team. Obviously, all the receivers for Joe Burrow. T. Higgins is turning out to be one of the best rookie wide receivers this year, along with Justin Jefferson for the Minnesota Vikings. But then he's got A.J. Green, who's just okay, and then Tyler Boyd, a guy that he's really grown chemistry with. So I like Joe Burrow this week to be probably a top 10 play, maybe even higher. So start Joe Burrow this week. Ryan, who are you starting?
So every year I talk poorly about this guy. He's probably my least favorite quarterback in the NFL. His brother thinks he should be the MVP, and I'm starting Derek Carr this week against the Kansas City Chiefs. He's already played the Chiefs once this year. He put up 347 yards and 3 touchdowns, and it's going to be a shootout. Kansas City is not known for running the ball and chewing up clock. They're looking for big shots. And the Raiders are going to have to go toe-to-toe with them this week. I really do think Derek Carr is a safe play. I mean, he threw for 347 yards last time. If you get 275 yards out of Derek Carr and he gets in the end zone twice, that's a great start out of a quarterback, especially with guys like Josh Allen that are on a bye. You've got Ryan Tannehill, who's got a tough defense. So you're looking for guys that are probably on the waiver wire, and Derek Carr is definitely one of those guys. And I'm going to take the bait, Steve. I think somebody had to do it here, and me being the guy that is more likely to take the bait on this than you, I'm starting Jameis Winston against Atlanta. He's back, and his offense is possibly better than it was last year. I would probably say they're better as a whole in New Orleans than Tampa Bay was last year. So I think Jameis Winston is primed for a good game. I think he's in a spot where he's kind of auditioning to be a starting quarterback next year. And what better team to go against than the Atlanta Falcons? The Falcons are just absolutely terrible defensively. Michael Thomas needs to show up at some point in this offense, right? And I think with Jameis Winston airing the ball out, he should be able to this week. And you got Alvin Kamara, who can break off any screen pass for 40, 50, 70 yards. So I think Jameis Winston is a fun upside play if you're finding yourself not liking who you're starting this week.
Love the play. A little famous Jameis back against Atlanta. Reminds me of all of his days in the Bucs. Moving on to these sit-em quarterbacks, and I'm sitting your Philly boy who you tweet a lot about, and you're just upset and sad and whatnot. I'm sorry, but Carson Wentz going against Cleveland. Cleveland, nothing to be super afraid about, but Carson Wentz is just playing like trash. I think that team is playing like trash. Their offensive line is depleted. I think that has a lot to do with it. Their weapons, a couple of them are just getting healthy as far as Rieger goes. Alshon Jeffrey is back on the field, 0 catches, of course. And Carson Wentz just isn't playing good football. I mentioned this just a couple seconds ago. He was a start last week. He was a top 10 quarterback in a lot of people's minds. And I think you're going to have to put him on your bench, and he can't be a streamer for you until he puts together a couple good games, which he's done earlier in the season, but it just, 2 good games in a row, and then you decide to put him in your lineup, and then he has a stinker against a really bad team. It's really tough to figure out. Philly's a weird team this year. That whole division's a weird division. I don't feel confident with starting Carson Wentz, even against the Browns. I'm also sitting Ryan Tannehill again. I think this is 3 weeks in a row for me as a sit, and he's just on a bad stretch. This is like 4-5 games in a row scoring like under 18 fantasy points. And like I mentioned earlier, 20 fantasy points is like the floor for your quarterback. In like a 10 or a 12-man league, you want to get 20 fantasy points out of your quarterback. And he's had a brutal stretch of matchups, just a brutal stretch. This is nothing bad about Ryan Tannehill and the Tennessee Titans. They're going through a brutal stretch. I don't think you should drop him if you have him on your team and you can keep him on your bench. I think he's got a good playoff matchups coming up for 14, 15, and 16. But Ryan Tannehill against Baltimore, Baltimore has become a little more open, not as great as a defense, but there's still a good defense, and I think Ryan Tannehill is going to struggle again until he has a good bounce-back week against a pretty poor matchup, but this is not that matchup. So I'm going to keep Ryan Tannehill on my bench. Who are you sitting at quarterback?
Yeah, I've got to sit Tom Brady this week. They're going against the Rams, and the Rams looked great against Russell Wilson. They are third in passing defense this season, and there's not going to be a whole lot of change this week. They're going to try to get to Brady. I don't see him having a 3 or 4 touchdown game just because I think they're going to dial it up a little bit in Los Angeles. So he's not a safe start for me. I'm going to talk more about a couple more Tampa Bay Bucks as we go on here, but I just don't like the passing game matchup just because I know that McVay is going to want to keep the ball out of his hands. I know that they're going to get active on the ground a little bit if possible. I know Tampa Bay's got a great run defense, but it's going to be a real weird chess game in that game. So I don't expect Tom Brady to go off. I'm also sitting Cam Newton. I keep putting Cam Newton on the wrong side of things in the start-sit. I just pick the wrong weeks to start him or sit him. So take this with a grain of salt. But Cam Newton's been absolutely atrocious as a quarterback this year. I was very high on Cam getting signed. I thought going to New England was going to be a great fit. He hasn't bounced back from his COVID stint. I don't know if that's a side effect of like the tiredness, and there's not too many excuses you can make for Cam Newton. The only bright spot passing wise for that team has been Jacoby Myers, and he's looked pretty solid as a wide receiver the last 2 weeks. He threw a touchdown in the downpour, so that was at least kind of interesting, but the Patriots have to run the ball this week. Houston is the worst run defense in the league. Damian Harris looked absolutely tremendous against Baltimore last week, so I expect them to run the ball 20, 25 times with him. So hopefully, if you sit Cam Newton, you're not on the wrong side of things, but I can't comfortably put him in the lineup.
I just have to mention, I don't think I've ever seen an NFL game where it rained that hard. At the end of that game, I don't think I've ever seen anything like that.
the first down markers that they were giving looked like the early 2000s bright yellow lines where it just looked out of place. Because, I mean, technology's gotten pretty solid in the last couple of years where it almost feels like that line's on the field. That was just like a highlighter right in the middle of a gray screen. And it was actually kind of fun to watch them just plod just around that football field. It was quite the game.
All right, let's go ahead and move on to the stardom tight ends. And this position is just, it's turning out to be one of the worst tight end years of all time. In a year where everyone once again said it's deeper than ever, it's shallower than ever. A top 10 tight end is now 6 points. That's a top 10 tight end. So, if you're playing DFS and whatnot, you really don't have to pay up for a guy like Travis Kelce because most of your competition is not going to have Travis Kelce, and everyone else is going to have a tight end who scores 6 to 10 points. You're not losing much there. So we'll give you a shot at your start and the starts and sits at tight end. I'll start off with Mark Andrews, a big name that's coming off some pretty bad weeks. Got a little more involved last week going against the Patriots. Nick Boyle is going to be out for the season. So Mark Andrews is going to have to pick up on some of the blocking. He already does a lot of that by himself, but I think a couple of those targets that go to Nick Boyle are just going to keep going to Mark Andrews. I think he's going to get involved against Tennessee. They're a pretty good matchup for tight ends. I think Lamar's got to find his connection with Mark Andrews in order for that offense to get rolling like they have been in the past, like they did all last year, like they did earlier in the season. And I think this is the week they do. So I'm starting Mark Andrews. He's finding the end zone. He's going to be a top 5 tight end. I'm also starting Eric Ebron against Jacksonville. Like I said, I like Big Ben this week. Got all the receivers involved last week, but Eric Ebron has steadily been involved in the offense. He's seeing the targets. Didn't have a great game last week, but the targets is all I care about. Big Ben's throwing the ball a lot. They're seeming to go away. They're going away from James Conner a little more. They're a little more pass heavy, which is great, which is why I like Eric Ebron this week. Who are you sitting at or starting tight end?
Starting Austin Hooper against the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles linebackers are absolutely atrocious. Schematically, they're a terrible team defensively, and Austin Hooper feels like he should find the end zone just because the way the Eagles have been playing. I've been dialed in on them, unfortunately, for my entire life, and I don't think they've had a decent linebacker since I was born, so Austin Hooper should feast if Nate Gary's anywhere near him. And I'm starting the other tight end in that game. I'm starting Dallas Goedert. For some odd reason, the Eagles loved him last year and don't love him this year so far in his return. I really think he's a key component to the offense. I think if they get Wentz rolled out a little bit more, they'll be able to find Dallas Goedert somewhere in the middle of the field, and he can make plays after the catch. I've always thought he was more George Kittle than he is Travis Kelce. So I think getting Goedert the ball in open space is a key to the Eagles' game plan. So hopefully he gets targeted 5 or 6 times.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and sit those tight ends, and I'm sitting Noah Fant versus Miami. First of all, Miami's defense is very surprising. They're actually a really good football team. Noah Fant, he might not have Drew Lock this week, which means another backup day. Some no-name quarterbacks. What's the quarterback's name? Brett. What's his name?
Brett Rippon.
Brett ripping a hole in my heart. That's what's happening. If you start Noah Fant, he's ripping a hole in your heart. I don't like Noah Fant this week. I mean, the targets will always be there, kind of. He's going to be a safety blanket, but this Denver offense is nothing you really want to be invested in. Going against Miami, like I mentioned, a pretty good defense, surprisingly. I don't like this matchup. I'm also sitting Jonnu Smith against Baltimore. Kind of goes hand in hand with Ryan Tannehill. Ryan Tannehill has good games when Jonnu Smith has good games. Since Ryan Tannehill is going to have a bad game, Jonnu Smith is going to have a bad game. And catching a touchdown and 1 catch or 2 catches, he might end up with 7 points. But that's not a great game to me. I'm chasing over 10 points for the tight end position. I'm not going to start a guy that I hope gets 6 points. I know that's what the tight end landscape is this year, but I'm not going for it. I don't like Jonnu Smith this week against Baltimore. Who are you sitting?
I got to sit Mike Gesicki, mostly because he stinks. But aside from that, Durham Smythe, I think is his name, keeps catching touchdown passes from Tua. Gesicki lied to me a couple weeks ago and said that he had a great rapport with Tua. He doesn't. I don't know where Mike Gesicki's been. He was supposed to be good this year. He's not. He's actually bad. And I'm also sitting Hayden Hurst. They're going against New Orleans. New Orleans is I think a top 5 run defense, so they're going to have to keep the tight ends in a little bit just to make sure that their run game can get established. I also think that they'll be able to find Julio Jones more often than not, so there's not going to be a whole lot of eating for Hayden Hurst, so I'm sitting Hayden.
All right, there you have it, your starts and sits of the quarterback and tight end position. Make sure to check out the other videos on the screen right now for your running back and your wide receiver starts and sits. Check those out. We'll see you next week.